One of the most devastating impacts of the coronavirus pandemic will be the damage done to small hospitals, rural hospitals, hospitals in places that could ill afford not having a steady flow of patients through March, April, May, June, and July. You know, colonoscopies and mammograms, those are the lifeblood of hospitals, especially for hospitals that were teetering on financial problems. We've had some of those hospital presidents on this program. Now Paul Seegert joins us. He's a managing partner for PCS Advisers, an employee benefits consulting firm in Northern California. Paul, thank you for being here today. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Steve.
Well, let's talk about this. I mean, these small hospitals that could ill afford no cash flow. Many of these small hospitals in rural areas, in underserved areas, in poor areas, the fact of the matter is they're going to close, aren't they? I mean, they can't survive unless there's a big pile of cash delivered to hospitals all across this country. That's a reality facing America as we head into 2021, isn't it?
It is. It's been going on for quite a while, really. We can go all the way back to the 1980s when they started to change some of the ways that they compensated Medicare and Medicaid. Has only accelerated that because of what you pointed out with the elective procedures being put off. So it's a pretty dire situation.
Hospital systems, well, but for big hospital systems, Paul, they will get beaten up some. They will get bruised and beaten. The University of Michigan, for example, had a $1 billion hospital on the drawing board. That has since been taken down. They're not going to build that new hospital, but they're going to survive. They're not going to close their doors at the University of Michigan, nor would you expect them to. But in other hospitals in rural areas, Hillsdale Hospital, Hillsdale, Michigan, it's a 65-bed hospital, give or take. It's in real financial peril because, like many small hospitals, when you bring in no income for weeks, months at a time, it's not sustainable. They might survive for a few more weeks or months like so many hospitals, but the doors are going to close. And this is something that had started long before the pandemic, isn't it? Small hospitals closing their doors because they could no longer compete.
Yeah, it is. And there has been some solutions that were put forward and some things that helped the situation. If you're a critical access hospital, that means you have less than 25 beds and you're 35 miles from another facility and some other requirements, then Medicare would compensate that hospital at 101% of their cost. Those hospitals will have a better chance of surviving, but you make a good point there. With a 65-bed hospital, they don't fall into that category, and they're dealing with Medicaid and Medicare payers primarily, and non-payers. And so it's a very tough situation. One of the criminal facts about American healthcare is that our government payers compensate these providers and hospitals below profitable levels. And so if they're in an urban area where there's lots of commercial payers, lots of employer plans, they shift that cost to those plans. You really have to compensate a hospital.
Well, if you look at a hospital like the one you're talking about, it kind of it hits in that bad spot, north of 35 beds, less than 100, say. But in many parts of America, that could well be the only hospital in a region. It could be the only hospital in a county or in a couple of counties or three. I mean, you see that in places like northern Michigan or Kansas or Montana, a variety of places that the only medical treatment is going to be one hospital. It might be 100 miles till the next one, but because it doesn't fit that certain definition, real problems could happen. Other things have happened that I think are a positive out of this. Telemedicine, for example. I think it saves seniors the hassle of driving and waiting in a waiting room to see a doctor when they can do so many things like check their blood sugar or their blood pressure remotely. All of these things can be done remotely. I think that's a great step forward. What do you think of that?
Yeah, they've relaxed some of those rules and even allowed some of these providers, some of these physicians to offer those types of services across state lines, and that has helped. And to your point, 60 million Americans rely on these hospitals. It's not a small number by any means. So we do need to make some structural changes to make it possible for them to survive.
So when you talk about structural changes, Paul Seegert is here, managing partner, PCS Advisers. What kind of structural changes are we talking about here, Paul? What things need to be addressed? I mean, other than the idea that more stimulus money will be created from the trees that grow money in Washington, and as we continue to harvest that money, yesterday $2.3 trillion harvested from the money trees. Short of that, what can we do structurally to ensure that patients can still have access to quality medical care and keep these doors of these facilities open?
I believe in the free market, and we really have never had a free market in healthcare because of the fact that it's so localized, regional, and that's prevented free market from delivering the results it can deliver. What we'll hear people put forth at a time like this is that we need to expand either more stimulus, like you pointed out, or expand Medicaid. Those states that didn't take Medicaid expansion during the ACA or as a result of the ACA, their hospitals are in rural areas are taking a little bit bigger hit, and they have more patients that they're seeing that are safety net patients for which they get no reimbursement. However, if we had a truly transparent free market in healthcare and made some structural changes such as allowing things to go across state lines, we could see this problem could solve itself. The industry could solve it. It's really the only way it will get solved. The other things, the stimulus, those are just Band-Aids to a longer-term problem.
Yeah, a longer-term crisis. Paul, I believe you're right. I hope we don't see a wave of hospital closures across this country. It's a huge challenge facing this country in the coming couple of years. Paul Seegert, greatly appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thanks for having me.
There you have it. Paul Seegert from PCS Advisers. It's something we've talked about here on the program. These smaller hospitals that serve smaller populations in deep financial trouble, not because they did something wrong, but because they were told, shut down, you could only deal with COVID. Many of those hospitals sat there for weeks and months with no COVID patients at all and no money. It's 25 after on a Tuesday. We'll be right back. It's the Steve Gruber Show. You are in the no panic zone. Don't go anywhere.